Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. When the blazing sun is gone, when the nothing shines upon, then you show your little light. Twinkle, twinkle all the night.
Welcome, dear viewer, to my twisted take on Dead Space. The original, not the remake, as hopefully by the time I release this, the remake won't be out yet. This video comes late due to several emergencies that popped up, including finding out my wife is pregnant with twins. Huzzah! I decided to review this since the Callisto protocol was just released. I played Dead Space years ago when it was still fairly new, and before the second one had come out. I remember this being one of the first games to ever scare the hell out of me. So anyone who knows anything about me knows that I'm not the biggest fan of survival horror. It is often too slow and drawn out, and while the environments are often atmospheric and thick with tension, it's just boring to me. A few games get it right. Resident Evil 2 Remake was okay, but to me, it never caught up to the terror of the original game. Perhaps it was because of the clunky tank controls, claustrophobic environments with fixed camera angles, or perhaps it was because I was 11 at the time and played it on the original PlayStation. And that game scared the hell out of me. As I grew older, the survival horror genre just didn't hold it for me. The puzzles and inventory management weren't things I've typically found enjoyable. Enter Dead Space to rock all those expectations and deliver a powerhouse performance of survival horror and science fiction. As someone who absolutely loved Event Horizon and considers it to be, to me, one of the most psychologically horrifying movies I have ever seen, just like with survival horror, horror movies are definitely a hit and miss with me. Most of the time being a miss. I never found Jason to be scary, or Chucky, Freddy or Michael. None of the classic slashers were something I found scary. Gruesome, bloody, yeah, but not scary. I watched my first horror movie when I was 5, and knew, as my parents told me, that it was just a man in a mask. So it never bothered me when I watched the movies, like Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th, because Jason and Freddy were just people in masks. They're characters. They're portrayed by actors. So I detached as a child from that and understood that what I was watching was not real. When I watched Event Horizon, probably at the ripe age of 12, it scared the ever-living crap out of me, because there was no boogeyman. The ship didn't want to hurt them. The ship was a hunk of metal. It was the presence that the ship brought back with it that was the real threat. This presence had no form. And to me, that was something that is much more unimaginably horrifying than a horribly burned man cackling with a glove made of knives. So, naturally, the first thing I noticed when I went to pick out the game is the cover of the game. The image is simple but conveys a lot to the observer. I didn't know about it. I just thought it looked cool. And when I read the back and saw the description, I gave it a shot. And boy, was that a great decision. The Dead Space has consisted of 2 great games, and one that was ruined by corporate decisions. EA, what a gift. So let's get started. Now the gameplay mostly consists of third-person shooting. There are a few abilities that you can get to enhance the gameplay, such as stasis and telekinesis. And stasis can be used to cause things to move slowly, to stop doors that will chop you in half, or to perhaps slow down a charging enemy so that you have the opportunity to blow off their limbs. Telekinesis allows you to move things, like pulling off the limbs of enemies and using them to impale other enemies. In the first game, you play as Isaac, a silent protagonist who is guided at first by the other members of his crew, Kendra Daniels and Zach Hammond. As the game starts, you are looking at the first video of Nicole, who is your partner, your lover. She's very clearly distressed, though you're not aware of what's going on. Your crew is on an emergency maintenance mission to the USG Ishimura, who is the largest planet cracker in its class. They're responding to a distress call. As you get closer, they notice that the ship is dark, so they go in for a closer look and start to hail them. What you get back when you reach them is a garbled transmission, and they think it's a simple communications issue. While that is one thing that will be fixed, it is not the only thing that's wrong with the ship. As they go into dock, the ship is thrown off course. Hammond and Daniels argue about the best course of action, and the pilot manages to land you inside the Ishimura, though it is a very rough landing. Before departing the ship, they sink their rigs, which is just a cool way to display your health bar without displaying it at the top of the screen. The immersion was definitely something that the Dead Space creators and the same people who created the Callisto protocol took seriously, as there's very minimum amount of HUD, and honestly, minimum things to break your immersion. Your health is on your back, anything else is on your back, and the only thing in Dead Space that actually might break immersion is your wayfinder, and even then in a ship that large it makes sense. They got rid of it for the Callisto protocol, which I don't feel yet is to the detriment, as it is quite linear of a game. So, anyways. Getting inside, you are met with an eerie amount of nothing. As you run a diagnostic, it shows that the Ishimura has taken a lot of damage and the tram system is offline, which makes it difficult to get around. The very large ship. When the lights cut out, as an automated quarantine kicks in, a few dark moments and you see a crew member go down. Their blood splatters at the window as something kills them. You are told to run. This game is very big on not holding your hand, especially at higher difficulties. This game expects you to move, and if you don't move, you can get killed. Now, the tutorial is very basic, though they really wanted you to know to cut off the limbs, as I was reminded 3 times in less than 60 seconds that I needed to cut their limbs off. And by this time I had already encountered 2 necromorphs. Another issue I had is that the tutorials don't go away on New Game Plus, despite the fact that you carry over your armor upgrades and weaponry. Now, the save system is something very similar to what you would find in other survival horror games. You don't have save slots that you can save into whenever you want. Instead, there are stations where you have to save, like typewriters in Resident Evil 2 and the save points in Alien Isolation. This is something I used to dislike in all games, but as I grew to enjoy the Dark Souls formula, and understood how a lack of safety net means that you can, if you haven't properly saved, you can have to go back a while if you haven't properly saved, and in Alien Isolation, this is especially terrifying. I remember playing that game, and the first time I saw the xenomorph come onto the screen, I felt genuine fear. It was like I was face to face with one of those creatures. And I had accidentally passed by the last save station unwittingly. It had been a long time since I'd saved. And I knew it. And I was suddenly feeling the fear, the same type of fear that I'm sure the developers wanted me to. And I loved it. So, while this type of save file might not work elsewhere, I think it works perfectly fine and serves a purpose in ratcheting up the tension. However, this being said, they implement a checkpoint system as well as a save system in here, so while there is tension, it is undercut by a short jog back from where you died. The weapons are varied, and the first one is a nice iconic weapon, the plasma cutter. This has a function that allows you to shoot 3 shots in either a vertical or a horizontal line. Using this is so satisfying as you cut off limbs. The creature designs are creepy, and the noises and movements are very off-putting. Some are very small and creepy. Others are large and monstrous. There are many different types of weapons, but for my playthrough I was lame and only used the plasma cutter, the plasma rifle, and the saw blade launcher. While you meet back up with Hammond, they are confused as to what's going on, what you're dealing with, and what these creatures are, and where the crew is, though I feel like the last one is fairly obvious. Hammond says the goal is to get to the bridge. In order to do that, you have to repair the tram so that you can travel about the ship. Since they are blocked, it has to be you. Hammond tells you that getting to the bridge will help him locate Nicole. I do appreciate this little touch. Yes, I know it's simply my character's motivation for the story, but Hammond is caring enough about his crew and family, really had me liking him and hoping he was going to survive. As you repair the tram, you are ambushed several times. Sometimes there's no noise, but the environmental noise is. And so when you hear a sudden snarl, it can be startling. This is more restrained, but still gives off the anticipation of fear associated with a jump scare. Unlike modern-day movies and games where they give an appropriately loud noise to accompany the creature. Hell, every time I flinch watching a horror movie, it's because of the assault on my ears. That's what's truly frightening. In this game, I found that they do give a sudden noise, though I have found that even with headphones, I never found this noise to be too jarring. And it only seems to happen when the creature shows up on the screen. There were times when I knew that there was a creature around, but it wasn't until the camera showed him that the jump scare noise went off. I found this to be a clever choice. After the tram is repaired, Hammond and Daniels take it to the bridge, while Hammond asks you to prep their ship, the USG Callisto, for launch. Daniels questions Hammond, and he handles it like a champion. And it makes me like him even more. He understands that Daniels is out of her depth and is freaking out, so he keeps himself very calm and composed. He is dedicated to his mission. As you get back to the Callisto, it turns out the problems are even bigger than you thought, as it explodes and leaves you all stranded on the Ishimura. Daniels continues to panic, and Hammond comes up with a plan for you to get to the captain and get his rig so that they can use the computer to find out what the hell is going on. Then they are attacked, and you are left to take the tram. Here's where you encounter a blind woman who talks as if she's expecting someone to show up, but clearly she's just cracked in the head. Even as she dies, she claims she's going with McCoy to the shuttle. Now, as you go, you encounter some interesting game mechanics. The zero gravity is an interesting take, as you can only jump from location to location using magnets to connect to the surface. It isn't until later that they introduced a free-flowing mechanic during Zero G. There is also a zero oxygen environments, which are very annoying, especially because they have a gasping sound after about 30 seconds, and it becomes really annoying. I understand that this is supposed to indicate distress, but it happens too soon. I understand that they wanted players to know something bad would happen if it hit to zero, but I felt that it started way too early, and just dragged on way too long. Especially if you're taking your time exploring and all you're hearing is You receive a transmission showing Nicole as a patient screams in the background. They don't know when the footage was from, and Hammond tries to tell you to keep upbeat about Nicole's survival. Now, I do want to take a moment to say that if you play this game with headphones on, if you can, do it. Just do it. It makes it so much better because there are noises that you don't really hear blasting unless you're blasting your TV. And even then, it wouldn't be as effective as the creepy whispering that I heard. I heard things about how patients were exhibiting certain behaviors and that the repeated, make us whole again, make us whole, make us whole. Things like that just get lost without a quality set of headphones. And for that, I'm going to thank today's sponsor. What's that? Yeah, I know. There's no sponsor. Not yet. Hey, Raycon, hit me up. Hammond tells you that he managed to trap one in an old escape pod. Then he pipes in with more good news. The ship's orbit is decaying and the engines are offline, meaning that eventually the USG Ishimura is going to crash down into Aegis 7. Naturally, because Isaac is the engineer, he has to go fix it. Turns out there's actually two problems. One is that the engines have no fuel, and the other is that the thing that keeps the gravity from pulling the ship down is no longer working. So you have to fix that as well. As you go along, you find out that the people on the Ishimura found something, and it started to have an effect on the crew. People were going insane, pulling their teeth out. People were coming back to life, changed, mutated into all sorts of monstrosities. All kinds of insanity. You follow along with a certain engineer, Jacob Temple, who leaves little audio logs along the way about what has happened. You find out that someone has sabotaged the engines. As you go along, Daniels gets into the logs and finds out that even before they cracked the planet open, people in the colony were experiencing widespread dementia. After fixing the issues, Hammond tells you that everything is working only for Daniels to pipe in and tell you that the ship's asteroid defense system is offline and the ship is going to pass through a lot of debris that is going to rip the Ishimura into shreds. Hammond tells you to meet him at the bridge. And then you hear a transmission Nicole asking for you, asking where you are. Naturally, because Isaac is a silent protagonist, he ignores the bitch. Having taken the tram back to the bridge, Hammond gets in touch to tell you to meet him in the captain's nest. He also tells Daniels to get to the ship reports. Antagonistic as always, she throws back a question about the marker, and seems to believe that Hammond isn't being completely straightforward with them. Hammond says that he only knows what they have found out about the marker aboard the ship. That the marker was taken from the planet and put into the cargo section of the ship. That the marker appears to be of alien origin. So you have to keep the Ishimura from being torn to pieces as it comes up through the meteor shower, since the Ishimura is no longer falling towards the planet. As they get through the debris field, Hammond tells you to get back to the captain's nest. Entering the main atrium, a piece of debris crashes down through the hole right before Isaac reaches into the captain's nest where Hammond is waiting. He insists to Isaac personally that he knows nothing about the marker and that it was supposed to be a simply repair mission. He then tells you that you need to fix the ADS Cammon's power source because it is shot and needs to be rerouted through, of course, 3 power junction boxes because there's always 3. As you leave, Hammond jettisons the escape pods he used to trap an earlier necromorph. You also see a video of a mutiny where they try to restrain the captain and sedate him. Unfortunately, the needle goes into his eye and he is instead killed in the altercation. Once you reroute the power, you have to man the main cannon until Hammond can reroute the auto-targeting system. In order to reach the cannon, you have to go outside of the ship where meteors are striking. Basically, it's a hunker down and then move scenario where you have to stop at every cover to wait in a passing barrage. Any slight hit from a meteor has Isaac splattering into pieces. When you manually take control of the cannon, you must destroy as many asteroids as possible. I didn't like this section and thought both times that I was on the cannon was rather annoying. It wasn't really anything wrong with the controls, I just had a hard time aiming properly, and I had to repeat the section several times because the Ishimura would take too much damage and I would die. Once the auto-targeting takes over, Hammond chimes in with Hammond tells you to get back to the tram station. On your way, Daniels tells you even more bad news. The oxygen level is taking a nosedive, and something has happened to poison the air on the hydroponics deck. Naturally, because you are the only one capable of doing anything, you have to go and make sure that you have to fix the air so that no one dies. It seems that the alien organic material that's growing on the walls is a habitat changer, that something is having an effect on the air. Daniels thinks that she can make a poison. That is, if you go and make it for her. Once the auto-targeting takes over, Hammond tells you to head back to the tram station. On your way, Daniels chimes in with more bad news. The oxygen levels are taking a nosedive. Something is happening to poison the air on the hydroponics deck. Naturally, because you're the only one capable of doing anything, you are the one who has to fix it so that everybody doesn't die. It seems that some of the alien organic material on the walls is actually a habitat changer that is starting to have an effect on the air systems. Daniels thinks that she can make a poison. That is, if you go and make it for her. Hammond tells you that he's going to head to hydroponics while you head to medical to make up whatever concoction Daniels wants to synthesize. As you leave the tram, Daniels pipes in again to tell you that the air is getting foul and that the chemicals you need will be found in the chemistry lab. Fascinating that, finding chemicals in a chemistry lab. I never would have thought of such a thing. Getting back to the security station, you hear the voice of Dr. Chalice Mercer, the game's truly devoted unitologist fanatic. He believes that what the marker does, the transformations, are a thing of God's design, and that what you are doing is attempting to stop God's ultimate plan. Once you get to the chemical capsule, Mercer shows his face to ask what you are doing. He then introduces you to the Hunter, which is basically your hunter-stalker that shows up from time to time and is basically unkillable. Basically the Mr. X of the game. And you are stuck in the room just long enough for you to cut off a couple of his limbs a few times before Daniel screams in your ear to run. Then she tells you that you need to get a DNA sample of the alien growth, which Dr. Mercer has been working on. Once you get the sample of DNA to help create the poison, Mercer cuts Daniels off and tells you you need to accept your role before cutting off the life support to the entire deck. Naturally, the first thing you need to do is get the air back on, or else you're going to die. Once you've cleared that small hurdle, Daniels chimes in once again to tell you that a large creature has entered into hydroponics from the outside, and that the crew have been calling it the Leviathan. Because, of course, they did. Anyways, apparently, the Leviathan is the reason why the air quality is degrading. As soon as you mix the poison, Daniels tells you to get to the tram and get to hydroponics. Mercer once again chimes in to admit that he has admiration for you, because after all, you are doing all of this. You are working so hard against God's design. He decides that you deserve to see the entire plan. Then, as you enter the chamber and come face to glass with Chalice Mercer, he reveals that his plans were to bring a few specimens with him back to Earth to spread the infection across the entire planet. He tells you to embrace the inevitable before the Hunter makes another appearance, and you have to freeze him in order to escape. Then you head back to the tram to head to hydroponics. When you get to hydroponics, you encounter a unwell Hammond. The air in hydroponics is so rotten that he's having a hard time breathing. He tells you that there is something big in food storage, and Daniels confirms this and tells you that you have to destroy some of the spore to clean the air quality before the lockdown will let up. As you leave Hammond to do their bidding, Daniels continues to call into question whether Hammond is trustworthy, almost trying to poison you against him. And while I understand why now, it just seems like she had a vendetta against Hammond, and since the beginning she's had it out for him. There is one point where her voice noticeably drops upon finding out that Hammond is still alive, and it just makes her seem like a total bitch. As you go about and shoot all the human gas bags that are contaminating the local air, you have to go up and down and all around the hydroponics, including into a zero-G area, and kill the different necromorphs. Once you are done, you have to flip a switch to start recycling in the air. Daniels tells you that she's been reading reports and that the crew have been experiencing mass hallucinations. She also admits that she just saw her brother on a security monitor, and that's simply not possible. As you head deeper into hydroponics, it is clearly being terraformed into something very different, and the alien material is growing all over. Once the air is clean, you have access to food storage where the Leviathan is. You use the poison, but it isn't strong enough to kill it, so Daniels tells you to go in there and kill it before it can contaminate the entire ship. And my only thought was, kill it? Damn it, Daniels, I'm an engineer, not a man in black. What? Uh-oh. What was I talking about? Fighting the Leviathan is pretty cool. It is a spectacle of a boss fight that doesn't disappoint. The zero-G setting and a few of the flaming canisters. The biggest problem I had in the first fight attempt was that I went in with very little ammo. I had passed by a store not thinking about it, and I didn't stop and purchase any ammo. So when I got there, I put up a valiant effort, and the fight lasted a good 6 to 7 minutes. But alas, the beast overall just ended up slaying me. The second time I came in with a whole bunch of ammo, and the fight was very one-sided. After this, Daniels informs you that you need to attach an SOS beacon on an asteroid before jettisoning it into space so that it can make a clean broadcast out into space without interference. You need to get to the control room, but naturally you need a key card. You play a quick game of clean up the asteroids and get the key. Then, on your way to get to the beacon, something amazing happens. You get to see the love of your life in the flesh, though never close enough to embrace. She guides you to get to the beacon before disappearing again. Once you have hands on the beacon, Daniels comes back to say she's lost your signal for a bit, then tells you that you have to attach the beacon to the asteroid. You do so while attempting to avoid the arms of doom that will smack you into pieces. Once you launch it, another hurdle suddenly arises. The communications array isn't responding, so of course any incoming hail will not be able to be heard until it's fixed. See, I told you that the communications array was going to be fixed. Of course, being the only one who is capable of getting shit done, you are responsible for going and making sure that the array becomes functional. As you exit the tram to go fix the array, Daniels informs you that the USM Valor just shocked into the area, and naturally you won't be able to communicate with it until you fix the communications array. Once it is done, you get a message from the USM Valor explaining that they have your escape pod. Yeah, that's right. The same escape pod that Hammond jettisoned earlier that contained a very much alive necromorph. Daniels tries desperately to contact the Valor, while Isaac does as he always does, stands there in quiet contemplation. It turns out that, why not? The signal isn't strong enough and they need to open the blast doors. But instead of it just being a simple button press, you have to go to the turret and shoot a giant-ass creature that's holding onto the outside. Because, damn it, they programmed in some turret gameplay, so we have to make sure that we use the turret gameplay. After you shoot off the limbs of the creature, you see the Valor come crashing down into the Ishimura. This knocks you cold for a minute, and when you wake up, Hammond is trying to contact you, saying that someone is blocking his rig. He calls for an abort to the mission.
We have to get the hell out of here. I think I've located a shuttle on the crew deck. Flight log says it needs a new singularity core, but we can probably salvage one from the Valor. I can see the tail end of it sticking out from the side of the Ishimura. I'm headed down there now to find a way inside. I'll meet you there. Hammond out.
And with that, your mission is set. After taking the tram, Hammond, now on the Valor, pipes in to tell you,
Good, you made it inside. Listen, I just found the munitions log for the Valor. I don't think their presence here is a coincidence. They're not on reconnaissance and they're not on patrol. This ship is prepped for war. They're on a seek and destroy mission. Do you hear me?
As the warning is finished, his connection is once again lost, and Daniels reminds you that you need a singularity core. This is where the plot thickens. Why would there be a war vessel in the area? As Hammond said, it wasn't on a scouting mission, so this leads me to believe that someone knew something about Aegis 7, and that the Valor was possibly a cleanup response that didn't know the full story. So when they picked up the escape pod, they weren't aware of the full situation, leading to the clean sweep of the ship, and even more infected that you had to fight. You get aboard the Valor and get the Singularity Core. Fighting enemies and obstacles, you are then introduced to Terrence Kyne. He suggests that if you can repair the shuttle, it would be better to return the marker to its rightful place down on the planet, which he suggests will stop the outbreak and calm the hive mind. It would be better to do that than simply flee. Once the Singularity Core is in your hands, you run into Hammond, who tells you that someone had been cutting off him from communicating, and that the core is the key to getting out of there. Then a brute shows up, and Hammond tries his best to stand his ground. This little boss fight here was actually very hard for me because I had very little health and no stasis meter to slow it down, so my character was limping around slowly, and a single glancing blow from the brute sent me to pieces. It took me several tries before I was able to maneuver around it and take him down. And Daniel's response to Hammond's death was definitely lackluster. Getting off the Valor and back onto the Ishimura, you get to the tram station and emerge for Daniels to tell you that she's located the shuttle, but you guessed it, it isn't going to be as simple as plugging in the core and taking off. The navigation card has been removed, so the ship is unable to be piloted. Naturally, you have to go find 3 of them. But before you have located the key card, you run into Chalice Mercer and a tied-up Jacob Temple, whose adventures you have been following if you pick up and listen to his audio logs. Mercer decides that Jacob is ready to ascend, to transform, and thus he kills him. Such a tragic end to a man who only wanted to find his lover Elizabeth Cross and get the hell away from the madness. On your search for the nav cards, Dr. Kyne chats you up to tell you to meet him once you have them. After grabbing one, Mercer lures the hunter to you, and you have to break him apart and escape. To drag it out some more, you get trapped into a room with the hunter and have to wait an arbitrary amount of time for Daniels to unlock the door. Once you escape, Kyne congratulates you for getting away, and Daniels warns you to be wary of him. When you get to him, he tells you that he knows about your plan, but the shuttle's shock drive is destroyed. He tells you that the church thinks that the marker is divine, but thinks that they don't know what's happened. He then shows you a video of a huge creature emerging from the ground. He tells you that Mercer calls it the hive mind, and then says that returning the marker onto the planet will seal the hive mind away and stop the spread of the necromorph infection. He tells you that if you repair the shuttle and bring the marker on board, together you both can return it and put everything the way it was before the Ishimura cracked the planet open and found the marker. So, you go and repair the shuttle and test fire the engines. Just as you do, the hunter comes crashing down one final time to chase you along with a few other baddies. Here you have to use stasis to slow the hunter down, blow his limbs off and right behind the shuttle, and just then run into the room and test fire the engines, burning him into a crisp so that he cannot regenerate ever again.
Test firing shuttle engines.
Once the hunter is gone, Kyne shows up and says he'll move the shuttle into place so that you can load the marker. As you are en route, Daniels chimes in to tell you to follow along with Kyne's plan. For now. Then Mercer video chats you one last time before letting one of the infectors take him and turn him into a necromorph. A few seconds later, you see him and the creature and blast him to pieces. I can respect the man's devotion to his religion, but Crazy doesn't begin to describe what's wrong with him. Once the marker is loaded, you go to get on the shuttle with Kyne, only for him to somehow get shot in the back while he's facing sideways to the direction where the shot must have come from. Then you watch as the shuttle flies away, completely dumbfounded for a moment as to what the hell's going on. Then Kendra Daniels comes into vid and gasps. She's turned on you and is now taking the marker. Now, I absolutely fucking hate this heel turn and think it would have been worked so much better if they had simply tweaked a few of the opening dialogue choices. The way they set it up is at the beginning is that Daniels and Isaac had a working relationship prior to the mission on the Ishimura. If they had made it so that in this mission she was actually just a type of liaison who didn't know the crew of the Kellyon, it would have explained her combativeness towards Hammond, and it would not have established that Daniels and Isaac knew each other from previous work. So her turning out to be a government agent instead of a liaison would have worked and been less contrived. This is a minor nitpick, but something that bugs me. Anyone else feel the same, or am I just a rambling moron? Let me know. This is where I feel that the story both comes to a head and falls apart. The bit with the marker is interesting, and the parts about the reveal of how Daniels is a traitor doesn't shock, it confuses. When you find out the ultimate twist, the one they thought was so clever that they spelled it out in the chapter title, so yeah, it turns out that you're crazy like everyone else. Nicole has been dead since you received that video and that you watched at the beginning of the game. Now this is where I want an explanation. Did Daniels find the full video in the ship logs? Or did Isaac simply not watch the video because he couldn't accept the rest of it? It doesn't explain and simply leaves you to wonder. That said, I feel it was a simply sloppy storytelling. I have read a few forums, and some think that she had the whole video, and some think that he knew all along but couldn't face the guilt of her death. That would be a perfect explanation if he had been a voice protagonist and they could have portrayed that. Instead, he was a silent protagonist, and we can't know that, and so they should have either shown the entire video at the beginning and let us make up our minds about her appearance, or they should have had dialogue that made it clear, instead of leaving it ambiguous for idiots to argue over the internet, that Kendra Daniels found a version of the video that had not been cut off. The story about the marker is actually very interesting. Apparently, it is a replica of an actual marker that was found on Earth long ago. The original marker was of alien origin, but the one on Aegis 7 was very much a human creation. When the project was scrapped, it was left on Aegis 7 and forgotten about, until the USG Ishimura found the planet and began to mine it of its resources. They set up a colony on the planet, and very early on, the colonists started showing widespread signs of dementia and hallucinations. Once the marker was brought on board, it triggered an outbreak. Nicole shows up and helps you recall the shuttle and bring Daniels back to the shuttle dock. Daniels jettisons from the escape pod down onto the planet. You shuttle the ship down to the planet with the marker and restore it to its original place, with Daniel showing up near the end to trap you and attempt to steal the marker back. Then she reveals the reveal. Again, I don't like how they handled it. Personally, it's a personal opinion, minor nitpick, I don't care, obviously. Anyways, then as you both scramble for the shuttle, the hive mind pops up and sends Daniels into nirvana.
Oh my god!
And the final boss battle commences, and this time I didn't have Grunt to back me up, or Commander Shepard. What I did have was an hallucinating, crazy-ass silent engineer, and apparently that was enough to take on the beast. Once the creature is defeated and the marker back in place, Isaac takes off in the shuttle and leaves Aegis 7. But Aegis 7, it seems, was not ready to leave Isaac. I love Dead Space. As I said earlier, I'm not the biggest fan of survival horror, but I love science fiction, and mixing in horror with it just seems so right. Well, most of the time. This game is a roller coaster that I'm looking forward to playing again as a remake, though I hope that I am wrong and that this isn't going to be a shot-for-shot remake. I think that a remake should actually change things to make it stand out as unique. doing something that is simply the same game, beat for beat, is going to appeal to some, but there are going to be those of us who wonder why we should pay full price for a game that just looks better than the original. Now, obviously, I know they implemented Dead Space 2's free movement and zero G's gravity situation, as well as bringing back the original voice actor for Isaac. But other than that, some of the gameplay that I saw literally looked like a shinier version of the game that you are currently seeing. I hope that I'm wrong, and that Dead Space Remake will innovate enough to make it feel like something fresh and new. The different enemies are varied and interesting, as are the weapons. The option to play this game are varied enough to be interesting and make several playthroughs viable. With the New Game Plus, you can go through as the ultimate badass. Glenn Schofield and his team of people who created Dead Space truly created a masterpiece. So far, their game, the Callisto Protocol, is turning out to be an atmospheric game, but not nearly as scary as Dead Space. It has a truly thick environment and amazing lighting and level design, but is it anywhere near the masterpiece that Dead Space is? Only time will tell. Again, this is only my personal opinion, and I've only put 5 hours into it so far, and I'm slow and take my time. I will have a quick take on it in the coming weeks, hopefully, so look forward to that. So what did you think of Dead Space? Was it the best survival horror game in all of existence? Or is it merely mid and boring? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time on the Twisted Nightmare Studio.